Hi, um, my name is Naomi, and I am made in the image of God. I was born and raised in Oceanside, California, by my mother and two siblings. We grew up in a lower middle class neighborhood, very close to all of my extended family. My mother worked several jobs in the medical field as I grew up, and that was just to make ends meet. And my father was a struggling drug addict my entire life. I saw him come in and out of my home, and that was a very different experience than most people. And neither of them had the opportunity to attend college. So attending college was a dream for me. I did well in school, but I didn't exactly know how to actually get here. In my senior year of high school, I transferred to a rather large, overcrowded, inner-city high school with a lot of gang activity. And the people that introduced me to the school were the ones that actually introduced me to college and how to approach the college process. So they were the ones that approached me about applying to Christian schools, applying to take like my SAT and ACT tests. And so I was really blessed that God provided me with these people to actually get me to Biola. And they made everything happen for me, and they are the ones that arranged my school visit to Biola. And so during that process, before I even decided on Biola, I spent a lot of nights at my school just looking up colleges, looking up how to apply for scholarships. And they were the ones who helped me to explain things to my mom, too, who was completely lost about everything. And so once I decided on Biola, it was a celebration for everyone. I'm not only first gen in my family, but I'm also the first one in my entire church to go to college. And in my family, there are 17 grandchildren, and I'm the youngest, and there are 28 great-grandchildren, and I'm the oldest of them. So once I decided on Biola, it was like a party for my grandparents and my parents and everyone. But I didn't realize that once I would arrive here at Biola, it would be a culture shock. Meeting others and hearing their stories made me realize that my story was really different. And during SOS in the first weeks of schools, I was afraid to tell people about my parents, about my family, about my dad in particular, and I was afraid to let my friends know that I couldn't afford to do as many things as they could. And I was even more embarrassed that I couldn't turn to my family to explain things to them, and I couldn't ask them for money to go out on the weekends or for different t-shirts and things like that. So I came into my freshman carrying a lot of worries. So the summer before I came to Biola, my family lost the home that we lived in for 17 years. My mom had become recently unemployed. My dad was facing 25 years to life in prison. And I was living with my sister and her family, so I didn't get to like pack up and move to Biola in this really cool experience. It was a really stressful experience for me. And I didn't know how I was supposed to share this experience with my friends here without making other people feel uncomfortable. My sister and my church members really wanted me to have a normal college experience, whatever that meant. And so they would call me often, and they would send me money to try to do things like everybody else did. But as time went on, I grew really bitter and upset that my family couldn't support me in the ways that I saw my friends and their families being supportive of each other. And I grew really bitter that my mom couldn't even afford to pay for my textbooks, much less anything else. And so after having the luxury of living in the dorm for 2 years, go Alpha, I had to move off campus. And this was a really upsetting experience for me because I didn't want to move off campus the way that I had to. I moved off campus with people I barely knew instead of with friends. And it was because that was the most affordable option, and they were family mutual friends, and it was really uncomfortable. And so after that, I also had to work really hard just to support myself financially. So by the time I was entering my junior year, my mom was absolutely depleted of being able to help me. And I worked jobs on campus, and they were fun, but they were mostly because I needed to support myself. So yeah, this is not something that all my friends could relate to. And it was hard to explain that without making people feel bad for me. It was hard, but I knew that it was what was needed because my family was struggling to support themselves at home, much less support me here. And it's been really challenging because being a first-gen student, which means that neither of my parents achieved a bachelor's degree, I've often compared myself to everybody else around me. So people talk about their experiences and the things that they're doing, and I love my friends, and I've loved all the wonderful experiences I've had, but I've also gotten angry at how hard it feels to try to just finish college. I've been able to get cool leadership positions, and yes, I did live in the dorms for 2 years, but not everything else has worked out like I wanted it to. And not having parents to guide me through college meant that we were both lost on so many things, like getting academic resources and how to navigate financial aid. No one told me that when I came to college, it would be hard to feel smart in my class. No one told me what it looked like to be professional and to get a job. No one told me how to approach financial aid and to actually be open with people that I was struggling. No one was able to tell me how to reach out when I felt consumed just by worrying about my family at home. No one told me that it would get tiring trying to explain college processes and how classes work to my mom. And no one told me how much pressure I'd feel to do well in school because so many people are looking at me to succeed. No one told me that it would be hard to envision myself as a senior at Biola and graduating in the spring. I love my experiences and my friends here, but let me tell you, it has not been easy. My name is Naomi, and I'm made in the image of God.
Good morning. My name is Jake, and I am made in the image of God. I was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, which for those of you who haven't been there is not the most culturally diverse place in the world. I grew up in a white family and was mostly oblivious and ignorant to the social injustices and things that were happening all around me. When I was in 8th grade, I read the book Black Like Me by John Howard Griffith. The book was written in the 1960s in the middle of the civil rights movement by an author who was a white man who grew up in the Deep South. He traveled for 30 days to the states of Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia, Tennessee, and Kentucky, and documented his experiences as a white man. And after 30 days, he returned back to the place where he started, and he underwent a process of actually dyeing his skin so that he appeared to be black. He changed his hair and his clothes, and he took the same 30-day route to the same places, talking and meeting with many of the same people, and this time documented his experiences as a black man. As I read the book, I was appalled and shocked by the things that happened to him just because the color of his skin was different. And I was amazed that something like this had happened in my own backyard. But for a while, it seemed to me that was something that had happened, and we lived in a world today that was different. It wasn't like that anymore. But for me, this changed drastically my senior year of high school when my family adopted a little boy from West Africa, my brother, Jonathan. When he came home, he was 5 years old. And immediately I realized that these things I had read in books and I had seen on TV, they weren't just stories that were foreign to me anymore, but it was the reality that I was living in, my family was living in, that my brother was living in. And I began to see my own privilege. And I know that as soon as I say that word, some of you might be looking for the exit and wanting to leave. It makes you squirm in your seat a little bit or feel kind of uncomfortable. And I understand, because I've been there and I felt those things. But for me, I began to see that privilege is the opportunity to look away. When we look and we see the things that are happening on TV in our country right now, as a white man, I have the choice to feel something, but I also have the choice to look away and to not do anything about it. And yet for my brother, as he grows up in this world, he does not have a choice to look away. These are realities that he is growing up in every single day as a young black man. And these things that I saw became reality for me, and I began to wrestle with them deeply. I want to love others well. As a child of God, I want to love my brothers and sisters, and I felt a shame come over me for the way that I was. I would have a very hard time standing here saying into a microphone, I am made in the image of God. I felt a lot of shame about the color of my skin and about who I was. And as I wrestled through these things, particularly my freshman year at Biola, I spoke at an event at Glenn's house, and I said to a group of my peers, I don't really know what I have to contribute to this conversation as a white man. I don't. And I'll share my story with you, but to be perfectly honest, I don't know what I have to contribute here. After I shared my story, my friend Joy came up to me and said, Jake, you have no place to be quiet. Because there are people in your life who may not hear this conversation unless you're the one having it with them. You cannot be quiet. And the reason that so many of these things continue is because we feel shame and we don't know what to do with that. We don't know where to take it. But Jake, you are made in the image of God. And as an image bearer, you need to have these conversations. And I think about those words every day as I go throughout my life, that I am an image bearer. And because of that, I want to have conversation. I want to have dialogue with my brothers and sisters. And I want to know them. At Biola, I truly have never met a group of people that love each other so well. Biola, we love well. But a question that I want to ask us today is, do we know each other well? Because loving is not just a surface level thing, but it involves knowing one another. There's a quote by Timothy Keller where he says, "To be loved but not known is comforting but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved is, well, a lot like being loved by God. It is what we need more than anything. It liberates us from our pretense, humbles us out of our self-righteousness, and fortifies us from any difficulty life can throw at us." Biola, we love each other well, and I have seen that. But my encouragement for us today is to know each other well, to listen to one another's stories, to engage in difficult conversations, and to admit I don't have all the answers, and I don't know what it's like to walk through your shoes every day. Biola, my encouragement for us, for myself, as brothers and sisters, is to know each other well, to ask questions, to live life with one another, even when it is messy and bumpy, to learn and to grow. My name is Jake, and I am made in the image of God.
My name is Ryan Tadal Caldwell, and I am made in the image of God. I am biracial American, as ethnically speaking, I am 3/4 Japanese and 1/4 Caucasian. I was born and raised in Torrance, California, a suburb of Los Angeles, some maybe like 20 miles west of here. Torrance is the second most Japanese American city in the whole entire United States, second only to Honolulu, Hawaii. So as a result, my experience growing up involved interacting with a lot of people that had similar backgrounds as me. However, growing up as a kid with multiple ethnicities, I found that I was often confused with who I was. For example, when I hung out with my Asian friends, I was the white friend, and when I hung out with my white friends, I was Asian, which left me with the question of, well, what the heck am I? For the most part, I was almost proud to be this kind of like ethnic chameleon that could blend in wherever. However, I began to recognize this kind of idea as a problem once I came to Biola. Throughout my first couple years here at this lovely institution, I had come to form some of the most wonderful relationships of my entire life. I was born and raised in a non-Christian home and had never experienced a genuine Christ-loving community in the form of a group of friends. Although I was surrounded by people who desired to know me and love me, I began to recognize that there was still a deeper issue inside my heart. I still had no idea who I was. It may sound like common sense, but I began to realize that it is extremely difficult to feel both known and to be known when you do not know yourself. I began to notice that in my group of friends, I felt as though I was explicitly the Asian friend. Although my friend group never intended to make me feel marginalized, the primary issue was not the fact of the occasional racial jest or stereotypical assumption, although that's not okay. No, for me, the issue was that an entire component of my identity was not being realized. Through a very long process, I began to realize I was not white, I was not Japanese, I was both. And that made me something distinct from identifying as one or the other. I think for many biracial people, we often feel the pressure to identify solely with one cultural or ethnic identity more than the other one. However, in doing so, we are denying a huge facet of who the Lord intended us to be. When the Lord knitted each and every one of you in your mother's womb, He knew every hair on your head, He knew every DNA strand in your body, every molecule, every atom, and He formed all of that with purpose and love. We are fearfully and wonderfully made, and I know that gets cliche, but how can we expect to experience being fully known and loved, even by the Lord, when we are missing out on the full picture of what it means to be made in His image? As I began to reconcile my ethnic identity and image of myself in the Lord, He began to put something far more troubling on my heart. It was around this period of time that the Ferguson and Baltimore protests and riots had occurred or were occurring. As I sat in my dorm room watching what was unfolding in our country, I found myself beginning to weep. For far too long, I had held an us versus them mentality. In my life, if my life or my loved ones' lives were not affected, what necessity did I feel to act? However, as my own image of God and who I was in Christ was being restored, I began to realize the far more important fact of who my family and loved ones actually were. If God was my Father, then these people were most certainly my brothers and sisters, and the injustice, the hate, and the pain that they were experiencing absolutely shattered my heart. I had to begin to act, to speak, to do something. They are my family, and they are still, to this day, experiencing deep hurt, frustration, and injustice. At this point in 2016, most of us have experienced the temptation to become desensitized to this fact. But as image bearers of God, God Almighty, the one who fearfully and wonderfully made each of us to be distinct from one another so that we may serve a distinct purpose in bringing Him glory, that God, how can we honestly say that we love that God? How can we honestly say that we love others and to not have our hearts broken for the brothers and sisters of the kingdom who fear for and are losing their family members, who fear for their own lives? Every single one of us, we are all made in the image of God. Though we all may still be in the process of reconciling the image of ourselves in the light of Christ, we as a body cannot stand for injustice. We cannot sit idly by as our family grieves, just because our lives might not feel like they're being directly affected. We are called to love, and we are called to serve. When one member of the body suffers, we all suffer. My name is Ryan Caldwell, and I am made in the image of God.
Biola University prepares Christians to think biblically about everything, from science to business to education and the arts. Learn more at biola.edu.